Hello, welcome back, and looking forward to this gameplay episode with a guest who was on last week, but not on both episodes, so we got him back for the gameplay pod. It's funnily enough not the first guest I'm going to introduce, AirJapes. Hello.
Hello, Ben. I was confused. Do I get to say hi? Do I not get to say hi? Which way are we going? But happy to be back chatting about gameplay. And there's a new 𝘍𝗫, which I'm sure was covered in content, but for me, that's a very big deal.
That is a big deal, yeah. He looks really good. And we also have with us Josh. Welcome back, as always.
Yes, yeah, thank you for having me. I've managed to pack that 𝘍𝗫, but I also had the option to take the Winter Wildcards version in the pick just before 𝘍𝗫 was released. So I put it in our chat and was like, oh, do I take it? I actually ended up not taking it. Turned out to be the right decision. So
yeah, he is appearing quite a lot at the moment. And talking of, we have someone who appeared last week, but actually hasn't been on a gameplay podcast for a long time. So good to have him on it. It's Nepenthez. Hello.
Hello. I've been promoted to the A team for the first time.
Well, both episodes are created equal. Josh gets very offended if we say otherwise, but it is good to have you on this one. Not for the first time. I think you were on a gameplay pod a long time ago, but it's good to have you back. And let's start off with some content chat. We've not heard from Nep or Japes on current content. It would be interesting to hear if there are any players you've used that you've been enjoying or not enjoying. Nep, let's start with you.
Who have I been enjoying? Yeah, I mean, I did like 𝘍𝗫. I used him in draft first, but now I've got him in my main team, and I like him a lot. But I tell you who I thought would be brilliant based on my own play style and the way he looks, and that I hated, was that 𝘵𝗬𝗬𝘦 93 card.
This is a master of none problem.
Yeah.
I looked at that card too, and he's like 5'11", so he's not a particularly big physical presence, so the aerial feels a little bit wasted. And then if you take away the aerial, you look at some of the other stats and you're like, yeah, like a lot of these are good, but I don't know if he's going to be creating enough of his own chances. It's kind of like one of those 𝘭𝘪𝘬𝘦 situations.
Yeah, he's also got 88 composure, right, which isn't particularly great for this time in the cycle, I guess. 97 reactions, though. That's pretty good.
Yeah, he's got some good stats, but the player that I was absolutely most impressed with, actually, is that Frank Lampard icon. I genuinely think he's insane.
Did you nominate him, Josh, or was it?
No, that nomination was stolen from me. I brought him up first, and then,
What's insane about him?
He's good at everything.
Yeah, literally that. The only thing he doesn't have that I think could improve him is a 5-star weak foot, but he just is competent at everything. And he's got a really, really good set of play styles as well.
Yeah, I got the base Frank Lampard, I think, is the first icon. I got this cycle out of one of the gambles, and at that point, very early on, it was actually all right. Like he wasn't nearly as bad as I expected. So yeah, I can understand that. Anyone for you, Japes? I guess you've just got the 𝘍𝗫.
I just picked up 𝘍𝗫. I've also packed that 92 Thomas 𝘭𝑪𝘂, and he looks pretty fun. I haven't used him, but I'm eager to give him a shot. And then I think, much like everybody else, I've packed the 90 Park Ji-sung. Also has an interesting mix of play styles for the way I like to play. So been some really fun cards, I think, in this Golazo promo, kind of across the board. And I found it quite enjoyable to use them. So hats off for that.
Yep. And Nep, actually, we had the evolution. We talked about it on the content pod. Do you have a player that you're going to be doing in that? I think you've been saying that it's good, right?
Oh, yeah, I really like it. I think that I actually think if I wasn't an Arsenal fan and didn't have Cole, I might do that 𝘆EN, because that 𝘆EN 𝘵𝐵𝐶 into that evolution. I think people are getting end game cards. Maybe not end game the last couple of years, but end game generally from like 2021 behind cards now in April, which is awesome. But yeah, I'm going to be doing Ashley Cole because he becomes like such a standout player where I honestly can play anywhere on the field apart from maybe centre back.
I'm going to second Ashley Cole just because I packed from Weekend League rewards at one point. I packed that 𝘠𝗠�Ｐastor, and I prefer Ashley Cole.
Ooh,
it's a little bit of a spicy take, but you just cannot. 𝘍𝗫𝗫 and 𝑊hipped is like just a combo for outside backs, and I like the opportunity to Evo him. I was like, are you serious? Because I was already playing him with an engine. Like, I don't think you need to, his defense is like fine. I don't think you need to boost that. And then he just becomes very, very silky on the ball. And I think that's a really, really good card.
Yeah, Josh, did you upgrade Campbell?
Yeah, Campbell's the one. I'm still Evoing him at the moment, but I think it was more just because he was already in my team. So it just felt like I'm going to use it. Like, I do think it, like, if I'd have done that 𝘆EN, I'd have probably used it on 𝘵𝑛 because I agree. I think that's a ridiculous looking card. If I'd have packed Cole, I might have used it on Cole, but I've got a little loving going with a Bompastor Rolfo kind of changeover at the moment at left back. So especially in the 3-1-4-2 in that kind of left mid role, I just love the both of them going up and down that side. They both offer something a bit different. Actually, something I'll talk about later because the reason I'm liking Rolfo is Ping Pass Plus. And it's Campbell's just very, very, very good. Like he's got that kind of frame that just pushes people off the ball. And kind of like it's nice to have got to a stage where Van Dijk is now noticeably easy to beat, I feel, like the gold one. But Campbell feels like what I expect like a good version of Van Dijk would feel like. That just like he's got kind of telescopic legs, but he's just got a power about him that it's that special sauce that some icons have, and especially some centre-back icons have. So yeah, him alongside Maldini, who's my only remaining one PlayStyle Plus player, the Dynasty's 93 rated Maldini. So yeah, very decent.
If you had 𝘵𝘚, would you be doing him or Campbell?
I would still be going with Campbell. And we had a bit of a discussion about this in the Pro Clubs chat last night. The reason I'm not a huge fan of 𝘵𝘚 is how bad his agility and balance is. And I know for some people, it's like, it depends on really how you use your centre backs, but 61 agility and 60 balance is like too low for me in the way that I use my defenders. And I feel like, especially if we're about to get into team of the season, we're going to get 5-star attackers all over the place with incredible dribbling and pace. And I just worry that if you don't have a nimble centre-back, you're going to be in a bit of trouble. And I think that's where somebody like Campbell has a slight edge. For me, he's like 80 agility and 81 balance. And I really feel like I can feel that when I'm controlling them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends how much you jockey to some extent, and you can compensate by jockeying. But he doesn't have jockey, does he, as a playstyle? So, that's going to make him slightly less mobile. Would you say, because I've seen a few people asking that, should I do 𝘵𝑒𝑛, who I've completed the SBC, for example, or just any other untradeable player that is eligible that they have in their club? I was surprised to see that question because I'd think you should just do 𝘵𝑒𝑛 because he's so expensive, right? I don't know. Is there something I'm missing here?
Yeah, I think you should just do 𝘵𝑒𝑛. I don't think I'd ever touch Van Persie. I think that the only one player that you can make a strong argument for is that Vidic, because the baby Vidic is very cheap, and with the Evo is incredibly comparable to the big Vidic, who's quite expensive. So I think if you're like a big Man United fan, or you just have that Vidic untradeable in your club, he's a decent shout as well. But yeah, I think if you've completed the 𝘵𝑒𝑛 SBC, he would be a shoo-in for me personally.
Yeah. I think that is sound logic. And on that, we'll take a break and we'll be back to talk, more proper gameplay. Hello, welcome back after break. Right, a relevant question, considering we were talking about defenders, is this one from Gary L. He says, has Intercept Plus usurped the Trash Panda Plus, for those wondering, that's Anticipate Plus, as the defensive meta? I.e., would you rather have Trash Panda Plus and base Intercept, or vice versa? This question is really for CBs and CDMs, he says. No, let's come to you first. I mean, I guess we should ask, what's been your favorite defensive play style, and, has that changed? And where do you kind of tier them, I guess, for those centre-back and CDM positions?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I'm horrific defensively at this game. I just can't figure it out. I use second man press way, way, way too much. And it kills me this year. But that being said, I think up until very recently, I would have said Anticipate Plus on centre backs and DMs. But I think the way that you kind of should defend, I think if you're a manual defender, Anticipate Plus is still probably a bit more ideal. But if you let the AI defend for you, Intercept Plus is absolutely key. And I have on each of my centre backs, I have one of the combinations that you spoke about. And I do find that Saliba with the Intercept Plus gets the ball a lot when I'm not controlling him. But I think for DMs, because you kind of should and do control them more manually, I think Anticipate Plus is more favourable because you're putting in more like manual tackles for them.
Yeah, that's fair. I get the sense, James, I don't know what you think about this, that Intercept still helps when you are manually controlling, because you sometimes get animations to start the ball.
Yeah, they stick their foot out.
Yeah, I do get that point though, because something like jockey, obviously much more using basically when you control the player. Josh, what about you? What are your thoughts on the jockey versus intercept thing?
So when I saw the question, I was like, no, Trash Panda Plus is absolutely the most important playstyle plus defensively. And then I looked at my two centre backs and my DM at the time, which was 𝘃𝗲𝗁𝘠, the showdown card, the aforementioned Maldini, and Ramirez Fantasy. All of them had Intercept Plus, and I loved it as a defensive trio. So I actually do think it's based on playstyle, on like your playstyle, a lot more than it is necessarily one being overtly better than the other. I would say that also my answer is probably different for a DM or midfielder than it is for a centre back. I find with my centre backs, I'm much more likely to be trying to put a tackle in, and so therefore I would like to have anticipate. Whereas with a defensive midfielder, I want them to be cutting the passing lanes, and I feel like the ball crosses their path a lot more than it would do a centre back, and so therefore, like, intercept is something that I prefer. I feel like when I've played with that back three, I don't have anywhere near as many times where I'm going, I can't believe they've let the ball through their legs. Like, there's so many times when a pass will be played at you and your player like lunges for it to let it go past them. And I don't think that happens with Intercept Plus. I think having Intercept normal is a bare minimum for a defender for me, though. Like, whereas I can kind of get by without Anticipate, mainly because I'm enjoying slide tackling a lot more at the moment. So I think it can depend. Like, the other thing is with Anticipate is it's very good if you're on classic defending controls. Like when I was using classic defense rather than advanced defending with the 𝘂𝑚𝑒, I felt like I was much more reliant on Anticipate for winning the ball back. Whereas now, especially like now I've started using Campbell, who's got Bruiser, the 𝘂𝑚𝑒s kind of do the same job with Bruiser as it would do a tackle with Anticipate. That's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah, I actually think that Bruiser can kind of compensate for not having Anticipate, right? Because it helps you win the ball. And I was noticing Campbell doesn't have Anticipate, does he? But he does have Bruiser Plus. So yeah, that makes sense. I guess that's the thing with these. It's like you have defensive stats that can compensate for not having these. Like you've got defensive awareness, which impacts jockey speed and kind of jockeying ability. Interceptions obviously impacts interceptions, and standing tackle seems to be the thing that sort of works alongside Anticipate. If a player has low aggression, actually, that's another example. Maybe Bruiser is going to help compensate for that. So there is kind of this give and take between stats and the playstyles. Japes, what about you? We haven't come to you on this.
If the player already has elite stats, I think I would rather have maybe Trash Panda. But the reason I say that is I definitely want to have like at least base intercept. Like it's something that I look for. I have that 85 𝘬𝗂𝘶 that I've like sort of been evoing, and I use his only defensive playstyles are jockey base, intercept base, and because I did the ultimate birthday evo on him, he's got block plus. His base intercept compensates a lot for some of his lower defensive stats. So it is a more impactful playstyle in my mind for a lot of players, but because I am a heavy manual defender, if the defensive stats are already close to maxed, I'm going to want to run away with the Trash Panda because I have that on that glitched 90 rated Edo Evo who has Trash Panda Plus and Jockey Plus, and manually defending, like I take the ball and then I keep the ball, and I like that a lot. I think having at least one center back with intercept is great. Defensively, I think I would prefer, like in the midfield, I would definitely prefer intercept to Trash Panda. Like when you manually try to take a player and press to try to win it back via a tackle, your other midfielders that have intercept take up better positions, and it makes it easier to create a counter or kill build-up a lot faster.
Yeah, that makes sense. Where do you rank the others? Like, where would you put kind of jockey and block?
Jockey is one I put really, really high. Just because getting higher up in divisions, you either need to have really high agility and high balance, or you can have 𝗏𝗀𝘃 or 𝗏𝗏𝘃 plus. But it just, there's so many attackers that can spin on a dime. And the way to kind of counteract that is to have at least some form of 𝗏𝗀𝘃 or 𝗏𝗏𝘃 plus. It's one of the reasons that I like that Alex Scott card. She's 𝗏𝗏𝘃 plus, and she's got Relentless plus, but she also, her only other defensive playstyle is just like base Trash Panda. And I will say the Trash Panda for wide players, I really, really like. I would rather maybe have that than Intercept out wide. Because there's too many times where you take it away if they don't have the anticipate, it kind of like bounces back, and then all of a sudden you have a really, really hard cutback opportunity to defend. And when they have anticipate, that doesn't happen nearly as often.
That makes sense. I'm interested to know, actually, Nep, you play a lot with much weaker players because of that Evo to Glory, where you're evolving the worst players in the game essentially over time, and the Arsenal Evolutions team. Is there anything you've kind of picked up from doing that about, I guess, gameplay more broadly, but maybe specifically playstyles, I guess?
Playstyles definitely have a very huge influence on like the lowest rated Evo RTG. For example, one player is called Sing, and he's actually now decent, and he's got decent stats across the board. But previously, he was atrocious with 2-star skill moves, but had Trickster. And this man could not do a roulette. Like, he would trip over the ball doing the roulette. But you click that stick in, and he's like, it's like 99 agility, 99 balance when he does the skill move. And it's like, that for me was the first real noticeable thing where I was like, oh my gosh, like, playstyles are actually making a humongous difference here. Like, it was night and day with how good he was with it.
Because that's quite a specific action, I guess, that's being impacted. Do you feel like you notice it with the ones that can be impacted by stats more? Like, for example, the defensive ones. Do you notice those even on the low stat players?
Well, I think you do, because, you know, it might be that placebo of, because I saw the symbol pop above their head, I recognize it more. It might not actually be better, but one of the things I notice most playing with the lower rated cards, which doesn't really depend on their playstyles or anything, is players with low pace tend to be out of position way less, and so I end up being better with them because I just can't run away with them fast enough. So
you can't drag them away fast enough.
Yeah, exactly. So I ended up defending better with players with, like, you know, 50 pace and stuff than I did with players with like 80, 90 pace, which I found quite weird. But in less of a defensive term, in more of an offensive term, definitely the passing play styles, you know, ping pass and long ball pass specifically, are, again, you know, massively noticeable with how far the ball will travel, how accurate it will be, how fast it will travel, and how the opposing player, or like my player, receives it. You know, if I ping pass into a centre back that's got, you know, 17 ball control, he still just controls it like just perfectly. And so they definitely do make a big impact.
That's interesting, because I think that is one of the things it says under the detail for it, something about, you know, it's easier to control for the recipient or something like that. So yeah, that is interesting to know.
That's like it's an interesting, like, potentially something to take a look at, is if you've got an entire midfield full of players with ping, do you need any attackers with first touch?
That's a good point, yeah. Although I guess you're passing between attackers too, so maybe they'd need to have pinged as well. But
yeah, I mean, I'm not, you know, I don't think it's as easy as like a black and white answer to that, but like, is it a bit redundant? Like, if you're getting an attacker with first touch plus, which has other benefits beyond just, you know, receiving the ball, it's like how quickly you can spin in some ways and do other things, but I mean, it's like, should you be looking for attackers with different play styles then at that point, because you are going to gain less of a benefit from having that? Maybe.
Yeah. Are there any particular combos, Nep, you've spotted that seem to work particularly well?
Not necessarily for the lowest rated RTG, but definitely from the Arsenal RTG. First touch plus and power shot plus on strikers is an incredible combination. And actually, I was saying to Josh like a week or two ago how, you know, EA haven't done any aerial plus power header plus combos yet, and this Evo that we got is the first time it's existed. But they have given a lot of players with first touch plus and power shot plus, and I find that to be crazy, because especially if you've got somebody with like high agility and high balance, like James was saying earlier, you know, attackers can turn on a sixpence. If they've got 5-star weak foot as well, you just fire a ball into them and hit a power shot straight away, and it's easy goals.
So, Josh, is it harder to turn on a dime or on a sixpence?
Well, as a young whippersnapper, not some of these oldies, I've no idea what a sixpence is. So my only frame of reference is a dime.
Yeah, can you pay 6 pence on card? I think you can. So easy to turn on a card, I think. So in terms of the original question I asked about combinations, Josh, I know you've been using these teams and playing card with Nep and stuff like that. Anything you've noticed around these teams as well?
Not necessarily combinations, but just to go back to a question you asked earlier about like a defensive play style that you may not have noticed. And the worst player in the team is the left back. By God, he tries, but 𝘰𝗀𝘀𝘀 is and he has.
So what is his rating and rough idea of stats and stuff? Because people might want
𝘰𝗀𝘀𝘀 has 72 pace, 51 defending, 64 physical, 40 passing, 49 dribbling. He is a quite simply horrific player, but he has slide tackle plus. And one of the things that I've noticed is you can just slide from wherever, as long as you're near a player. Difficult, 72 pace is going to mean you've got a small window to do it, but he will more often than not get the ball from situations he shouldn't get the ball, which when you consider he's got 51 defending, that kind of, like, if you've got 56 slide tackle and 47 defensive awareness, like, it shouldn't really make a difference, like, as much of a difference as it does. But what using him made me start doing is looking at which of my defenders and midfielders had slide tackle, even just as a base play style, and start using it more. And you can just clatter through the back of people and it won't be a foul because you've got this slide tackle plus that's just like, whip the legs around to get the ball. It's a timing thing. You've got to know when to use it, when not to use it, all that kind of stuff. And if your opponent's good, they'll end up kind of flicking it, which if you get no ball, it is going to be a foul. But it was one of the biggest things that I noticed in terms of play styles. I think in terms of the combination, first touch, whether it's plus or normal, and having pinged pass, pinged pass in general is just something that I'm finding I'm doing more and more and more, and is becoming like a prerequisite to be anywhere in the front six of my team. Even my wing backs now, I'm looking, do they have ping pass just as a playstyle or as a plus, even as a bonus? But that Ramirez has intercept and ping pass plus, and he kind of sits in the attack, kind of on the edge of the center circle. So he's the person that kind of pivot player where if I need to recycle the ball, that's who he goes back to. The number of times I just ping it into a strike with him. 𝗵𝗀𝗀𝗀, I feel is the best player. The 93 𝗵𝗀𝗀𝗀 is the best player for this. And just the touches that you can take out of it, if you can get a reverse elastico off very quickly after a ping pass, I really don't know how you can defend it properly. It feels like something that is slightly broken that people don't do enough of. I don't think people do enough driven passes full stop. There are plenty of situations where a ball will get intercepted. I know it's a lot in Nep's gameplay, not that I'm having to go specifically at him, but where...
But you are.
But I am. But if you drill the pass, if you think a player is might intercept a pass, if you're trying to squeeze it into a gap, there are two things you can do. One is double tap. So if it's a short distance of a pass, double tap it. And if it's more than about 15, 20 yards, if you drill it, it will reach its destination 90% of the time, because I just feel like defenders aren't quick enough, especially if they don't have intercepts, to get on and to even get their foot in the way. And even if they do, because it's drilled, they don't take a good first touch. So there's every chance you get a rebound off of it. So ping passes, I just think people need to start adding it into their game more.
Ping passes, though, you can get yourself into this thing where you move up and attack too quickly.
Oh yeah.
You just baseline. This is what is my new issue that I seem to have. Because I have a bunch of players with ping plus and I can rapidly move the ball forward with great accuracy, I find that all of a sudden I'm sprinting because it's I just broke a line and now there's a lot of room. And oftentimes it just creates this out and out problem of nonstop sprinting encounters. And so,
because you're running into a dead end, right?
Yeah, exactly. You've progressed so far and your team hasn't really caught up. And so you're just constantly in this cycle of trying to take players on and second man press. And it's just...
One thing I wanted to point out about pinged pass, I think a lot of people think that it just affects driven passes, right? Because, I don't know, they're the kind of pingiest pass. But it does affect all passes, doesn't it? So
it just doesn't trigger, I don't
faster.
think. It doesn't trigger above the head. Like, you don't get the symbol on a normal pass. So I think that's where it might be a placebo. I driven pass with players that don't have it as a plus, and I still think it's very good. So it may just be that it's very good in general.
Yeah.
But yeah, like in terms of the progressing too quickly, one of the issues I found early in the game cycle, then it disappeared and now it's back again, is passing it back from a striker into the midfield became quite difficult, especially if you were on a counter, because of the way that the defensive AI worked and players progressed back so quickly. You would pass it back to a kind of more static midfielder whilst your opponent's midfield was actively sprinting backwards, and so they'd intercept the ball. If you ping the ball back to a midfielder, they don't intercept the ball. So if you are progressing too quickly, you can ping the ball back down the pitch towards your own goal just as quickly as you can ping it the other way. And it helps, I think, with that progressing the midfield into the attack as well as just the attackers.
Yeah, I feel like it's a bit of a must-have playstyle. I wonder whether that's a bit of an issue. I don't know. Do you think that there are these must-have playstyles and that is a concern, or any kind of thoughts on the balancing of playstyles?
I don't think there's a single must-have playstyle until you kind of define your own way of wanting to play, right? Like, I think at that point, like if you, for example, if you've got like Drogba up front and you've got aerial plus and power header or whatever it may be on him, I can't remember, is it power shot plus, but aerial plus and power header regular, and then you've got left mid and right mid that have got like trickster and first touch plus, you're just doing it wrong. At that point, you need like a long ball pass plus or a whip pass plus. So I think it's based on how you want to play determines whether or not you need play styles. But the only one single play style I would ever give credit to be a must have for any player is Relentless.
I agree. Unless it's a centre back, or some strikers can get away with it. But I think one of the reasons this Drogba is so broken is because he's got Relentless. He's brilliant in the 80th minute.
That's where I think people misunderstand the way stamina works. And I actually can't find the literature on it for this year. I can only find it from about 5 or 6 years ago. But loss of stamina decreases pace, shot power, passing accuracy, defensive awareness, and a few other like key stats. So even though you might when people say, "Oh, I've got this guy and he did this in the 80th minute," it's like, well, yeah, because he's probably got like a fraction of the stats that he actually has because he's tired. And then when you think about subbing players in, which is obviously very effective, they don't get a boost from chemistry, so they only have base stats. So if you've got somebody with Relentless and they've still got max stamina, like first of all, it gives you max stats for longer, which I think is massive. But second of all, it gives you the ability in those games that are maybe a bit more close, or that you need to come back in the last 20 minutes to go on constant pressure and not be absolutely crucified.
I think also some people maybe don't think about it on centre backs. I'm not saying necessarily you need Relentless, because it's probably one of the positions you can get away with it. But if a player has very low stamina, they, I believe, have worse jumping when they get tired as well, which makes a lot of sense. And actually, that can be really bad for conceding late on from corners and stuff like that if they aren't jumping properly, basically. So I think it's a really good point to make.
The other benefit, especially of like Relentless Plus, that I don't think gets talked about enough, is the second man press. So like on outside fullbacks, the ability to use the second man press like pretty consistently and be able to apply pressure that way for much longer is really, really useful. But that's a defensive benefit. But the other defensive play style that maybe doesn't get talked about enough. I think I would rather have this than slide tackle at this point, at least on center backs. Maybe outside backs. I don't really know if actually I've used a slide tackle plus on an outside back that way. But same card, the 𝘬𝘃𝗲𝗏, because I did the Evo, he got block plus, and I am surprised at how, like, when you hit the tackle button to initiate a block, or not even always a manual block, the reach that card has and the frequency at which he's able to block things is pretty incredible. I find myself more and more being like, this is not a dead play style. this is a play style that I am like aggressively happy to find on cards. And it's just another, in some ways, kind of like Intercept, a thing that can trigger in a meaningful way, or you can trigger, but the frequency at which they actually execute the block is so much higher, like noticeably higher. And I think getting closer to team of the season, that's a play style that I am going to feel like I want to have more often than not to deal with a lot of the attackers that we're going to see.
Interesting, because I know Ito has the regular block that you have, right? So do you notice a marked difference between the two?
It's not as good as Block Plus. It's not nearly as good as Block Plus. And maybe it's good, because, and part of it could be that, when 𝘬𝘃𝗲𝗿 does it, the little icon flashes above his head, and I'm like, look at this guy out here blocking things. Work for the badge.
Yeah.
So there could be some of that involved, but also like I genuinely feel like the frequency at which 𝘬𝘃𝗲𝗿 blocks things is shocking. Like, it's amazing to me. I haven't had a center back do that, and mind you, I haven't used center backs with Block Plus like that. So it's definitely a play style that I'm here for. Like when players go, one of the noticeable things is when players go to line up that finesse shot on his side, the amount of times that he just steps in front and blocks it is more often than not.
That's interesting. I was going to say one final thing on defensive play styles. And actually, Josh, you had quite a few Intercept Plus players, so you may have noticed this. But I spotted it flashing up when a player with it would make a aerial clearance defensively, for example. And I was wondering whether that was actually because they were using their interception stats and their Intercept Plus, or it was just because they were intervening in play, if that makes sense. And so it would trigger. Did you get any sense that it was affecting clearances and that sort of thing and aerial duels?
It's weird. Sometimes I feel like the game has like 3 states, but really only sits in 2, which is either your opponent has the ball or you have the ball. And during a pass, one of you two has the ball. But there are times when it's a contested ball where you get locked onto it. You'll feel it with a defender, and you get locked onto the ball. And I think if it's a contested ball, I don't think it counts as an interception. But I honestly feel like it depends on whether they've played a pass or whether they've played a cross. Because I feel like a cross becomes a contested ball, whereas a lofted pass it's still in their possession in inverted commas. So I've not necessarily noticed it make them much better in the air, but I have had it flash up a couple of times.
Yeah, thinking about it, actually, I've seen it on like deep free kicks and stuff, where they would be pressing square, and it's kind of like a lobbed pass almost into the box. So that would then count as a pass. And also maybe when there's a ball in behind that's going over the top, and then he'll head it away. So I guess that would be more of an interception, right? So I guess, it depends on the context. And I don't think I've necessarily seen it on crosses, as you say. I think that's enough playstyle chat. I do feel like we could talk about it continuously sometimes.
For days.
Really good. But I guess that's a good thing. And we'll talk more about good things and bad things, I'm sure, about gameplay with Nep after this break. Hello, listeners. A quick reminder that this podcast is made possible through the generosity of supporters out there. And actually, they aren't just doing it out of the kindness of their heart, because you get a whole extra podcast every single week as a supporter. And you can sign up for a 7-day free trial right now over on Patreon. And after that, it's just £3 a month to continue supporting. It makes a huge difference. The podcast for a time wasn't able to be weekly because I had other work commitments, but this has made it possible to deliver a podcast every single week, and in fact, an extra one too, just for supporters, as I mentioned. So if that interests you and you want that extra content, and actually if you would like even more, there's the support to Discord at the gold tier. There is the Hall of Fame at the end of the podcast in the icon tier. There are loads of perks available. So why not check it out if you haven't done so already by searching Support for Weekly, or following the link in the description of this podcast. If you consider doing so, that would be hugely appreciated. And a big thank you to all those supporters, as I said, keeping the podcast going and keeping Foot Weekly weekly. Right, let's get back into the pod. Hello and welcome back after the break. Right, we have been talking a lot about playstyles. Maybe we continue that a bit because obviously that is really the biggest change to gameplay this cycle, I would say. Nep, we haven't heard thoughts on gameplay this cycle from you. What is your kind of overall summary, I guess, of your thoughts on gameplay this cycle, first of all?
I actually really like it. It's the game modes I find to be the biggest problem. But in terms of gameplay itself, I don't think... there is definitely one single most efficient way to play. And you see that kind of like ad infinitum in the pro comps. And then you see people emulate that. And then people that continue to emulate that and then play to a high degree of the game, whether that be in Elite Division or, high ranks in champs. All they play is the same people playing that way. And so they might think it's quite boring. But I don't think we've ever had a game where there are as many applicable playing styles, not play styles in the game, but actual play styles as this. I think this has been the most open game for different formations, different player types. How many years have we had either the big man as being the only kind of striker option? I remember many years where Ronaldo was always way better than Messi, to the point where Messi was fodder very quickly because he was just pointless. And then we've had some years where the small man is far more valuable. And I think this year, but both, everything works. Everything can be used. And I think that is due to playstyles.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Japes, I know you're someone who prefers, I guess, using bigger players to some extent, or it's been something you've enjoyed doing a lot. You talked about 𝘅𝑚 the other week. In fact, I think you persuaded Josh Watt to even evolve 𝘅𝑚.
Yeah, I stuck him in the 88 Evo.
Did you?
Yeah.
How is he?
Yeah, he's great. He's a lot of fun. I totally see why he kind of pushed other people out for you. He's on my bench. He's not starting, but he is a lot of fun to use.
Yeah, I think the new Drogba card will probably push him out just for fun, but also aerial plus power shot plus is the combo for me up top. Both of them have that. I think the Drogba quick step and press proven is beefy. And 𝘅𝑚 has, while he has the passing play styles, the quick step press proven means you can ping him a ball into the box and he can sort of spin around in a different way to score. So, I don't use my striker. I'll probably have to shift my mentality for because I was using 𝘅𝑚 to kind of play off of sometimes as well. But I think he's awesome. But I evoed I still have that 88 𝗵𝘂𝑬𝑟a, who has block plus, but block plus in the midfield is very whatever. But I figure he's the only single playstyle card I have in my team still. Oh no, I guess 𝘬𝗃𝗲 still only has one playstyle, but I figured why not do 𝗵𝘂𝑬𝑟a? He's been had a good run in the club. He's 88, we'll make him 89. But I would agree, kind of Nep. I don't use big players necessarily in all the positions though. I very much like using big players, but my favorite outside backs have been women's players. I used 𝗏𝘅 forever. I like Bon Pastor. Whether or not, I mentioned Ashley Cole, pushing her out. Maybe we'll see. But I like Alex Scott. And then even for other, players that I've used, 𝗏𝑤𝑎, no secret, has been maybe my favorite card in the game. Dating back to September, when I started going on and on and on about her base card. And her team of the year is obviously still very much a presence in my squad and hard to get out. So I think that's what's been nice is it has given me the opportunity to build tactics and squads. I have more flexibility to do things the way I see them in my head. And it's easier because so many different things can work to get that to actually come alive on the virtual pitch.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think one of the criticisms, Nep, of playstyles has been that they can kind of feel quite arcadey, or I guess those games where you have specific, moves you're going to do because you've set them as your loadout, right? Do you think it does feel like that, or do you think they've got the balance sort of somewhat right?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. The balance. I think balance is probably my favorite word with regards to EA and their games over the last 5 or 6 years. because it very, very, very rarely is balanced in any way. And I think playstyles are the same. You know, we saw at the early stages of the game, Finesse Shot Plus was just ridiculously overpowered. And then I'm not quite sure what happened, but the transition created 𝘅𝑚 to be ridiculously overpowered. And then more recently, the kind of like long ball into the big man has become ridiculously overpowered. And I think as a way that they've actually tried to balance that is they've given centre backs now a lot more aerial plus playstyles, which I think we're seeing a lot more. And even in evolutions, a lot of them are giving aerial plus as well. But it always seems to be reactive balancing rather than proactive. And that just will result in a continuously unbalanced game. And especially when they like release a new player with properties that we've never seen before, or when the community finds something that we haven't seen before, you know, like the before they nerf power headers, like the power header, whip past power header plus was crazy overpowered. You know, who knows that we don't get a team of the season card with 3 playstyle pluses and the combination is just so ridiculously broken, especially maybe in tandem with another player and their playstyle pluses. It could just create that very arcadey game style again, which I genuinely don't mind if we just had better game modes to play it in.
So that, yeah, your biggest problem this year with the game is the Rivals Champs setup?
Yeah, it is, yeah. I think Champs Qualifiers is a great mode to be repeatable, even if they just made the rules untradeable. I think everybody, and even nerfed them a little bit, I think everybody, well, I think I would be happy with that. I can't speak for everybody, I guess, but I think it would be a good move for the game. Because, you know, once you've done your Champs and Qualifiers, there's only really one place to trial and experiment. And because of the way Rivals is handled, it's just not a fun gaming experience no matter what.
If you could make changes to Rivals, how would you change it to improve it? Whether that's like a sweeping change or, I don't know, some tweaks.
I think from what my community talks about a lot is they would like relegation to come back into play, but I don't think that would be very good because like it would just exacerbate the sandbagging issue where people would just play themselves 100%. Down to Division 10 for easier games elsewhere.
Yeah, it's a funny one, that isn't it? Because I think that was something that was requested by the community was to
get
stop
rid of relegation.
To stop sandbagging. Now everyone's like, oh, no, I want to go back down there. Let me back.
I think a good interim option before a more permanent thing would come in a future game would just be making it like the old seasons system where you kind of get a reward after 10 games. Or like, I think the genuine easiest thing that they can do is just make it form-based matchmaking instead of skill-based matchmaking. I think that would alleviate a lot of the issues within Rivals.
Also over a week or something, or
I literally just think a rolling form, like, you know, they can even increase the maximum because it's unlimited games and to have the form up into like 20s or 30s. But yeah, if you go on a loss streak, you should just come up against lesser skilled opponents, right? Like, because you're in theory a lesser skilled opponent at that point.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because you can still have like it sort of tracking the number of games you're playing and giving rewards appropriate to that, right?
Yeah, precisely. Yeah.
In terms of gameplay balance this year, one of the things that I know you've spoken about a lot, and I would be interested to get your thoughts, and then I'd like to sit back and hear Jape's thoughts on it, are team and how important team is this year. Having used like the Evo to Glory team being absolutely terrible, the Arsenal Evo team being kind of competent but not meta by and large, and then having some experience but not total experience using like a very meta team. How big do you think the gap is in terms of the quality of your team versus your results this year?
So I think the way you've phrased that with Japes' thoughts is I think Japes is going to think that it doesn't matter too much, because also it sounds like Japes plays with a lot of real fun players. But I also think that there are just some people that are just exceptionally gifted at this game. And Japes is one of those, right? Like, 'cause some people have just got certain mechanics down and read how the game plays as like without having to think about it on autopilot. And I think that allows you to use really fun players and draw the best out of them. But to answer the question from my personal experience, for somebody who's not like one of the 1% of the 1% in terms of ability on this game, I think this is the game that we've had that has shown the biggest gap in having a great team versus not in terms of getting results. Like, every time EA release a bunch of Evos that brings my Arsenal team up to scratch or at least close, I started getting way better results in champs and way better, like way more like comfortable wins in rivals. And, you know, on the odd occasion, I've nearly reached the elite division. And then there are some times where I'm stuck in Division 5 and Division 4 when the Evos didn't, you know, we had a good couple of months where Evos just didn't really boost anyone, yet everybody's team was getting better. And this last couple of weeks has been a massive showcase to me again personally at how big the gap can be for your team, because 2 weeks ago and the week prior, I got 15 wins in champs with the Arsenal team, which I was so proud of. And I thought, okay, I've cracked it. I was like, let's go. I'm going to push on to 16 plus. I'm going to do it. Then the Golazo promo came out with insane cards that are easily packable and very affordable. And now I'm struggling to get 14 wins again. Like I literally finished on 13 last week and 12 the week before. And I think it's due to the fact that the teams that I'm playing against now, everyone's got, not everyone, but, you know, like so many players are now like juiced up to the high 90s in basically every key stat. Almost every player is 5-star, or at least has 5-star in one of the categories. The playstyle combinations that EA are creating are making these players far more well-rounded. And it just becomes a mission when you've got an anomaly player that's lacking in some area or another to do basically anything.
So if you had a team that was like, let's say it's like the best SBC team that you can get at the moment, that kind of tier of team, do you think you'd be getting like 16, 17, 18 wins or something then?
Maybe not 17 or 18, but I think I'd hit 16 wins with like the best meta SBC team, yeah.
I guess it does make sense if you got 15 before, right? Japes, I mean, would you agree that it's a bigger gap than ever in terms of player quality?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense of like there's some cards that are just kind of ridiculous, but they're ridiculous at performing in certain aspects of the game. And so like the ridiculous SPC team that we might talk about, you know, your Eusebio is what used to be 𝘵𝘃, though like I don't see 𝘵𝘃 that much anymore, which is phenomenal. Well done, EA.
Yeah, it's actually nice because those two are not around so much anymore. So,
but it used to be that playing a specific style, those players just suited that style. Their play styles suited that style, and they were just ahead of everything. Now I sort of take a look back and I look at my team and I'm like, I have a very good team. Like, don't get me wrong. And I think it's, when we talk about very good teams, I think it's a little bit weird this year because a card like, you know, I'll use Lorin is 13K. But if you were to give those stats and play styles to, we'll say, Højlund, I think you're, you know, what's the player of the month was like 80K and people didn't bat an eye at that. I think that card's like probably worth a little bit more. So they've just done a really nice job of creating all these very usable cards that are not necessarily big names. So filling out your team with like what I think Nep would describe as like fun cards that aren't like the absolute elite meta players, but they're still like 95% there. And that I think is like, for some folks, overcoming the skill gap up to that 5% in, you know, kind of casual weekend league rivals gameplay is like no big deal. If I was to try to take, you know, my squad and some of the players that I use into matches against pro players, well, I'm going to fall short on a team basis then. The difference with team for me is once you hit people that are like perfectly as good as you, if not maybe a little bit better, if they're a little bit better and they have a like perfectly meta squad, you're going to have a harder time. And also there's some positions where it just seems to matter more. Like my results drastically improved as soon as I brought that glitched Ito into my squad with the two playstyles. Like all of a sudden I had a center back that could do exactly what I wanted, that could hold it down in a way that I wasn't able to before. And that started shifting, you know, my results. But also I play I wouldn't call it like a particularly, I play a style that catches some people off guard. And I suppose I've optimized my system in some ways to beat the 4-3-2-1. Like I'll struggle when I play players that play like, when I play against the 4-3-3-4, I know I'm going to have a hard time. I just know it. It's the way the players sit. It just creates problems for my setup. But against the 4-3-2-1, they're not going to be used to playing against what I play. And so I think this is like the weird thing. There have been meta players that I've used too that I just don't love because they don't do what I want them to do in the game. And there are just other players that are maybe not deemed like as good or as meta that do it better. But in certain positions, like the one that is a standout to me when I think, going back in time a little bit, Virgil van Dijk, fundamentally better than every center back in the game. Going like back a little bit. And so when I brought Van Dijk into my squad, my weekend league wins started going up. I started winning by more goals. I won more games. And that's where it's like, yeah, team matters. Team absolutely matters because at earlier stages of the game, especially, there were players that were so far superior that if you didn't have them, you were putting yourself at a big disadvantage. On the flip side, playing with a big disadvantage, in order to compete, you learn to try new things and you learn to be unpredictable in a different non-meta way. And I think that has long-term benefits over the course of the cycle, but like team definitely matters this year. I just think now we're at a stage where there's so many good players. Like, have we ever seen this many players with 5-star weak foot at this stage? No way.
Yeah, I guess that leads to another question actually. Nep, I guess previously it's been the case that meta team that's really strong that you're not able to use has been very expensive to achieve or very time consuming to achieve. And actually being able to compete with a team that's very strong previously has been pretty difficult. Whereas I guess now it's not necessarily that you actually can't compete because you can't get a good enough team, because you can get a good enough team. So for most players, they're probably thinking, oh yeah, it's totally fine. Like actually there isn't a huge discrepancy between players. People might not notice it so much, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in previous years, it was always incredibly difficult and required like either money, if you just wanted to spend it, or a lot of time in the menus doing, micromanaging things that weren't always enjoyable to kind of keep up in one regard or another. And it's why like rewards used to be so much more valuable and everything to that regard. But now, yeah, EA have made it so easy to get a very, very, very good team. And because of playstyles and combinations with them, there isn't really this year, like maybe Team of the Year Haaland, but there isn't really this year a standout player that you would just put above the rest as in an attacking sense, because there have just been so many greats. Mbappe was great, 𝘬𝘯𝘰𝗍 was great, the Werner was great. At the start of the game cycle, Son was head and shoulders above everyone. But now, like I'd say in the defense and midfield, you probably see the same group of players. You've got the Stanways, the Rolfos, the Sauers, the Bruno Fernandes cards. But up front, you probably actually do see quite a lot of creative players. And that is due to EA. And I think like when I look at Evo squads on stream, because I love the evolution side of this game, and it's like, for me, the most enjoyable aspect of the whole game. And I look at other people's Evos teams and they're so awesome. And like one guy, he showed me his team. He has like 1,800 games on this team and he's getting like rank 1s and 2s in champs. And the team is just so far below the power curve. It's still a good team and a fun team, but he's obviously just like exceptional at the game. And I remember saying like, I just never see these teams. Like I never come across these teams, yet so many people have them. And Josh says he sees them quite a lot in like the lower divisions. These sandbaggers ruining all of our fun staying in the lower divisions and stuff. But he sees them a lot in the lower divisions. I'm like, that makes sense because you can't, even if you're like half decent at the game, you can't get out of those divisions with these fun teams. So yeah, I think it's never been easier to get a really, really good team compared to this year.
And that makes it harder for you, I guess, because the teams you're playing are way better than they maybe would be previously. I think there's a big difference between being able to get very, very competitive team and being able to afford the top 10 players in the game, which is a kind of different thing and maybe is an issue. Whereas, getting a competitive team, not so much. Josh, any further comments before we wrap up?
No, I think it's been fairly well covered. Like I actually wasn't overly expecting James to have a massively different opinion. I just know that James has used different teams this year and has found success like fairly, not easily, because obviously it takes a lot of skill. I just thought I was interested to see the difference between the two. I think in general, I agree that if you were using like that Arsenal team 3 years ago, I think it would feel like you were ultra competitive with most of the players you come up against, because the standard of team, there was a big gap between what was the like most meta and the best players in the game and what was like affordable and reachable for most players. And I would argue, going back to 𝗤𝘃's point, the fact that at the beginning of the game, like Van Dijk was just head and shoulders above every other defender. The same with Mbappe up front. Then we got that 𝘬𝘶𝑉𝘏. And I think the reason why we felt like we've maybe stood still a little bit from a power curve perspective at times in this cycle, I actually think they've done a better job this year than previous years. But I think the reason why it's felt like we've stood still is because they've just introduced more cards at that level of like Mbappe and Van Dijk, that there's now a lot of variety in terms of players you can use. As much as I still think there is a meta squad and players that you see all the time, I do think that there is a variety because of the amount of like icon SBCs we've had, because of the availability of packs this year. The chance that you've packed something big is fairly high, I would say. I think most people will have packed a 500,000, $1 million coin plus player at some point through this game cycle, and I don't know how true that would have been in previous years. So, yeah, it's a weird spot this year where, because a good team is so easy to get, it makes it feel like team is way more important. But if a team's easy to get, then the team's not as important. Like, it's kind of there's a weird dichotomy going on there. I don't think it's necessarily the perfect system.
Yeah.
One thing I'd just like to touch on with regards to like that, and one thing that 𝗤𝘃 said earlier, and something I mentioned on stream yesterday, was actually knowing your team is really important. Like, 𝗤𝘃 says he now looks out for certain play styles or for certain things for the way that he wants to play. Sometimes I try a player and I hate them, and it's because I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize they had, tiki-taka, or I didn't even realize they had power header. Then I try them again and I know what they can do and what to expect for them, and it is a massive difference. Like, if you've got a finesse shot plus player with 5-star weak foot and you keep trying power shots, you're using them wrong, right? And I think a lot of people, again, don't deviate from the meta because they might try a player, try to do what they normally do with 𝘬𝘶𝑉𝘏 or 𝘑𝑟𝑛𝑎, fail with it, and then be like, oh no, they're terrible. And that's the end of it.
Yeah, you're totally right. You got to experiment a bit as well with players, because you might not have used that playstyle before, right? So you got to try it out. You got to try different things. And actually, point just leading off that, just to end it on, is look at the base playstyles on players. I do think there's a tendency, probably not from people listening to this podcast, but more broadly, that people just look at the playstyle pluses and they try and use those, whereas actually those regular playstyles can have a really big effect, and certainly in combination together can be really, really helpful. So do check what that player has for regular playstyles too. Great. Well, that does wrap us up. Very interesting chat, Nep. Thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you very much to 𝗤𝘃. Great to have you back on. I hear you might make a content pod next week, right?
I should be able to make the content pod next week, so I will be looking forward to that.
Nice. Thank you very much. And a reminder, actually, send in your pound for pound powerhouses for next week. I don't know what we're getting on Friday, Josh, but maybe a warm up for team of the season.
Yeah, I mean, like the rumors are rife. There's been card designs leaked, and it's starting this week. I mean, it may have a week of warm up, a week of most consistent Premier League team of the season, 2 weeks on Friday. It could happen. I'm not ruling it out. So yeah, excited. It's nice not knowing what's going to come.
Yeah, it is. It's yeah, definitely
exciting.
Thanks for joining us on this pod, Josh.
No, it's been a lot of fun. Enjoy chatting.
Yeah, definitely. Right, great. Thank you very much to all you listeners as well tuning in. A reminder, you can catch this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. And if you would like an extra episode every week, then you can get that as a supporter. There's a free trial. Just head over to Support for Weekly. And if you are one of those supporters, a huge thank you for supporting the pod, keeping it going, and a big thank you to those icon patrons: Dave B, 𝘬𝘃𝑗, Darren W, Alistair M, Dom P, Rob P, Jeff B, Damon H, Tom B, Adam G, Neil P, Alex M, Jake S, Dan W, Roger D, Lee A, Andrew C, Nishant, Waterman, Dylan H, Adam R, Rob L, Brendan W, Michael K, David G, Jimmy K, John D, Michael B, Aditya S, and Joshua K. Plus a special thanks to Luke M, Dave B, 𝘬𝘃𝑗, Tom M, Darren W, and Pato Foot for advice and production assistance. Before I leave you, just one more thing to add though. Ultimate Team is a bit like life really. It has its many ups and downs. If you're having a few more downs than ups in real life in these more difficult times, then please don't feel that you're alone or need to struggle on without taking action. If you go to thecalmzone.net, there's loads of resources, advice, support, or even just a friendly chat for anyone who needs it. If it sounds like it could help you, then head over to thecalmzone.net. And for now, have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.